Welcome to Wellspring Church. We're so excited that you're joining us today for our online worship experience. Here's what I want you to do. Jump down right now, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you can stay plugged in to everything happening right here at Wellspring Church. And if you're new, we want to get to know you more. So in the description box down below, click that new here form. And if you're in the Ocean County area, we're going to mail you a free Wellspring t-shirt just to say that we're excited that you're joining us online. Now, today we are excited to continue our PlayCation series with a message from Josh Raj as we continue in Luke chapter 11. So let's give a listen.
Well, what is up, Wellspring Church? I am feeling blessed and honored to be here with you on your screen preaching the Word of God. Before we get rolling, I would just love to take an opportunity to pray. So if you could join me in prayer right now. So Jesus, we just thank you so much. We thank you for who you are. We thank you for your sacrifice on our behalf. We thank you, Lord, for giving us life. I pray that you would be with us now and teach us, Lord, from your word. Teach us to be more like you. Teach us to live in light of your love, Lord. Teach us to know your greatness and live in light of that as well. Lord, as we seek to know you more, I pray that you would help us in that process. And Lord, also inspire us to be closer with each other and as our brothers and sisters growing in Christ together. Lord, we pray these things in your name. Amen. So good morning or good afternoon or good evening, whatever time you may be checking this out. I want to start by saying happy Father's Day. So today is Father's Day. And so for some people, Father's Day is just great. Like it's a really cool day. You get to hang out with your dad and that kind of stuff. But for some people, Father's Day is a little bit more rough. So either way, maybe you don't have your biological father in your life or right next to you, but maybe you do. So if you're right next to your dad, I want you to give him a big hug, maybe give him a nice punch in the arm, tell him happy Father's Day. So let's just take a second to do that. And maybe if your father or father figure in your life isn't right next to you, you just want to shoot a text really quick and say, hey, I want to say happy Father's Day. Thank you for your investment into my life. So for me, like I said before, for some Father's Day is rough, for some it's great. For me, it's kind of in between. It's kind of a bittersweet sort of a thing for me. So for me, to start, kind of on a downer note, my dad actually passed away 8 years ago. And so I was 23 when he died. And so much life has happened for me since then. Bought a house, had some kids, got married, all these other things. And it's hard that I didn't get to share any of that with him. So Father's Day is a reminder of that missing link in my life right now. But on the flip side, I am now a father, like I just mentioned. I am a father to two beautiful little girls, Eliana and Everly, 4 and 2 years old, and they are amazing. Anyone who knows them just knows that they will brighten your life. They are happy and fun most of the time, but we love them. They're great. It's so fun for me to be a father. And another mark in the positive column is my brother, Wheels Langworthy. Coolest guy you could ever meet, the bald guy that usually is standing by the front door when you come into church, if you've ever been here with us before. Just the most amazing person ever. And I get to call him my father-in-law. I still call him Wheels because you kind of just have to do that. But that's my father-in-law. That's the guy that I get to have Christmas and Thanksgiving. And he just dropped a cooler off at my house today just to help me out for a barbecue we're having this weekend. He's a great guy. So he is a father figure in my life. And so for me, it's bittersweet. I'm not sure what it is like for you. Something I want to share is this. I don't know how well this will come out in the camera. Probably not at all. Graham right now is trying to make it come out, and it might look horrible, but we're going to try to make it work. So this hat says best dad ever. Would it help if I came closer? Or not a thing? Are you zooming? Cool. So this hat says best dad ever. Again, not sure exactly how well you can see it, but it has some colors all over it. My wife Krista bought this hat at Target, and then the girls kind of had some fun coloring on it with some markers. And this hat says best dad ever. This is a really fun gift to get for my kids. I love wearing it in the summertime, barbecues and stuff like that. It's just a fun hat. Best dad ever, this whole thing. But it does kind of raise this question, even if I'm wearing this hat and kind of making this statement, declaring this best dad ever, that's me, here I am, it does kind of bring us to this question, am I the best dad ever? And to that point, what's the criteria we would use to determine that? The problem is it's so subjective. Because to me, the best dad ever might be Wheels Langworthy, because he's in my life and I love him and he's awesome. But to you, it might be somebody totally different. And we might use even different criteria to determine that. when we start talking about greatness and something that is the best, essentially we're in a competition here. We're trying to determine what's the best thing, what's the greatest thing. And of course we're here and we're in church together, so we're going to talk about Jesus. And we're going to ask this question: is Jesus the greatest? Let's take a couple minutes and look at Luke chapter 11, verses 29 to 36. And we're going to ask two questions of ourselves this morning or whenever you're tuning in. And the first question is this: is Jesus the greatest? So let's read together in Luke chapter 11, starting in verse 29. When the crowds were increasing, he began to say. Now, Jesus is a great teacher, so we're going to expect that he's going to say something really kind, something really nice, like kind of fluff people up, make them feel good about the fact that they're there, like kind of make them feel like, okay, yeah, like Jesus, you're so cool, and we're so cool, and we're like doing this thing together. So here's how he starts. He says, he began to say to this big crowd that's gathering for him, this generation, talking to the people, is an evil generation. Okay, so that's a different direction than I would choose to go in, because I would probably do the nice thing, like, oh, guys, you're so great, because if I stroke their ego, then they feel good about coming to see me, and then we all feel kind of great. But Jesus goes in a very different direction. We'll get into this a little bit, but one of the reasons I think he did this is because Jesus is too committed to the truth to be a people pleaser. These people are not living in light of the realities that they should be living in, and Jesus is aware of this, and he is not the kind of person, he is not the kind of God who can just sit here and say, you know what, but that's okay. You can just be wrong, and you can just be bad, and you can just do all those horrible things. And we'll get into what's wrong with these people in a minute, but the first thing is that he's too committed to truth to be a people pleaser. Another aspect of this is that Jesus' kingdom is established. It has been established since the beginning of time and will exist far beyond the end of time. So he is not worried if he ruffles a few feathers. And also, it's him calling people out, because what we're going to see is that, again, they're just not quite getting it. It's not quite clicking for them. So he goes on, continuing in verse 29, it says, it seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except for the sign of Jonah. For as Jonah became a sign to the people of Nineveh, so will the Son of Man be to this generation. The crowd before him asked for a sign, and essentially what they're asking for is, Jesus, are you the real deal? Are you the greatest? Please prove it, and then we'll follow you. And when I first read through this, just sort of gazing through it and thinking through it just on my own, I'm like, man, what are these people about? Like, they've just seen all these miracles that Jesus did. They've just seen all these great things, and they're still like, not quite sure. Like for me, 2,000 years later, I'm like, yeah, I believe in Jesus, no problem. I have faith, I believe. And these people are standing right in front of him, and they still aren't believing. Well, there is a difference between me and them, which came out through studying a little bit. And one thing is this. This was a time where the Roman Empire was ruling. And so Jesus' movement was kind of a revolution counter to the Roman Empire. And if you followed in line with Jesus, it might lead to some significant consequences. There was a lot at stake because you're kind of going against the Roman Empire. So in some sense, it's kind of fair that this is a group of people saying, all right, Jesus, I need to make sure, all right, just one last thing. I just need to make sure that you're the real deal, because if I follow you, it might not end so well for me. This would be like for us, I don't do a whole lot on social media, but I know a lot of people do. Like if you're scrolling on like Insta or Twitter or TikTok or whatever, and you see a celebrity's name, right? Let's say you see like Taylor Swift and you see some post. Well, a question that might come to your mind is this really Taylor Swift? Is this really the real deal? What do you look for? What's the one thing you look for to figure out if they're the real deal? It's all about that check mark, baby. If you have that check mark, then you believe that their identity is real and you can follow in line with what they're saying. Then you can say, yeah, that really is Taylor Swift. This really is this person. So now I put more stake in it because they are verified. What these people are asking is, Jesus, do you have a check mark? Are you verified? Are you the real deal? Are you really who you say you are? Or are you just a fraud or a fake? They need to know. So Jesus' response, again, may be different than how I would respond, but he's Jesus, so he does things way better than I could. What he does, instead of doing something in the present moment, he brings their attention to something that happened 750 years earlier. He starts talking to them about this guy named Jonah. And now Jonah if you don't know who Jonah is a man written about in the Old Testament. He's called by God to a place called Nineveh, and he doesn't want to go. So he boards a ship. So he's here, and he should take a ship going to Nineveh that way. Instead, he's like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to take a ship going this way. Well, you can read more in the book of Jonah, but essentially what happens is this big storm comes, and he comes to realize this is God kind of punishing him for going the wrong way, and he decides, all right, I'm going to save everyone else on this boat. I'm going to jump off the boat. He gets swallowed up by a fish, in the belly of a fish for 3 days, gets spit out, ends up in Nineveh. He preaches a message of wrath against the people of Nineveh. We'll get to them in a second, but also hope to them. So he's in this belly for 3 days and then is spit out. And he's assigned to the people of Nineveh. And so Nineveh at this time, back in the time where it's written, was the capital of the Assyrian Empire. And if you've ever heard this phrase, like Sin City, can be used of certain modern day cities, that kind of describes this area of the world, just known for very evil, very perverse, just very, not a place that you would want your kids to be out at night by themselves, kind of a place. So Jonah doesn't want to go, and if we're honest, we probably can't blame him, because how would they react to him? Yeah, God called him there, but I don't know, like if I go and try to tell them they're wrong, or try to tell them something about God, or try to tell them something that contradicts their way of living, how are they going to react to me? He doesn't want to go. Well, it turns out that he does go, and that he does preach this message, and that the people of Nineveh, the whole place, include like the emperors and all these people, respond. And they have faith in God, and they change their ways. It's essentially a miracle of miracles that this could have happened. And so this is a group of people, of Ninevites, that respond positively to Jonah's message. But now Jesus is kind of saying like, hey guys, like, Jonah preached and they listened, and now I'm the Son of God and I'm preaching, but you're not listening. Like there's a missing link here. Another thing that's mentioned here at the end of verse 30, Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man, saying that again, that he will be a sign just like Jonah was a sign. I've heard this phrase "Son of Man" before, but didn't know exactly what it meant. So I turned to Google, of course, and what I read there was that the Son of Man is God's Messiah, destined to preside over the final judgment of humankind. Jesus is then the one who will both save, but also the one who will judge. So to recap where we are so far, we have a group of people. Jesus is talking to them. They ask him for a sign. He basically kind of in his reaction says, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go a different route. He calls them evil to start, and then he puts their attention back to something that happened many years before in Nineveh, and Jonah being a message there. So let's continue together. Let's see what happens next. So far, that's where we are. Let's continue in verse 31, and I'm curious to see what happens next. So verse 31, it says, the queen of the south will rise up at the judgment with the men of this generation and condemn them. For she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, something greater than Solomon is here. The men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here. So in verse 31, it starts by referencing the queen of the south. And through studying this, I determined that, learned that the queen of the south was the queen of a country or an empire or whatever you'd call it, called Sheba. And the Sheba, this area is what would probably be modern day Ethiopia, to get a context of where it was located. So she is someone she's a queen, and she hears of how amazing Solomon is, the king of Israel. He's so wise, and he's so, so honored and respected. And she wants to go check it out for herself. She wants to see what's this all about. And so she goes, and we can read about how this plays out. You can read more in 1 Kings chapter 10 if you read that whole chapter. I'm just going to read a couple verses to get an idea of how she responded as she's testing Solomon and asking him a lot of questions and asking for advice and all of these things. So this is how she responds. I'm going to read from 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 9 and 10. Starting in verse 9, it says, "Praise be to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on the throne of Israel. Because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he has made you king to maintain justice and righteousness. And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, large quantities of spices, and precious stones. Check this out. Never again were so many spices brought in as those the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. This is kind of intense. Imagine a ruler from one country going to the ruler of another country asking for wisdom, asking for advice. It's kind of unheard of. Usually you'd be at war with each other. Maybe you'd be at peace with each other, but you really wouldn't be going and asking someone for advice. So who is Solomon? Solomon is the wisest king of Israel. You can check out a few books in the Old Testament that kind of detail that, and one of them is the book of Proverbs. Solomon wrote most of that, and it's a ton of wise sayings and wise things that you can just read through and check out the wisdom of Solomon there. So again, Solomon was respected not only inside, but clearly outside of Israel. And so the queen of the south and Solomon are here, and a phrase that's repeated is that twice is rise up at the judgment and condemn. So this is in reference to both the Ninevites and the Queen of Sheba. So let's paint this picture really quick. So this is the people that Jesus is talking to are Jewish people. So Jewish people believe themselves to be the chosen people of God. They were the ones, Moses came through and did all these great things. And these are the people of God. Well, so you have the Jewish people. It's kind of two groups of people we could talk about back then. So you have Jewish people and then Gentiles. So Gentiles is kind of anyone who wasn't a Jewish person. And the problem with Gentiles is that they're essentially not the chosen people of God at this time. Jesus comes in and kind of shatters that system quite a bit. But at this time, you have Jewish people and Gentiles. And the Ninevites and the Queen of Sheba were both in that Gentile group. So you have a group of Jewish people, and Jesus is saying, hey guys, you're a bunch of people chosen by God. I want to let you know that people not chosen by God, they're going to come at the time of judgment, and they're going to be standing on my side of the table against you, because you are not doing what you're supposed to do. This would have been mind-blowing for these people. But it points us to a reality that it's not about the family you come from. It's not about me or your mom or your whoever. It's not about any of that. Our relationship to God is between myself and God and between yourself and God. That's all that matters. And what Jesus is pointing out here is that the queen of the south and the Ninevites repented. They turned away from lives of sin, doubt, and self-absorbed living to a life with God, and are seen as in better standing with God than the Pharisees, who were the religious elite, kind of the religious leaders or religious teachers of that time. And they kind of had a reputation for having an overinflated sense of their own importance. So you have these people that are kind of obsessed with themselves, who are like, we're the chosen people of God, and we're so great, and our poop don't even stink, and all that kind of nonsense. And you have these other people who are saying, God, we love you, we want to follow after you, you are so great, we humble ourselves before you. You have people who are kind of overinflating their sense of self because of who God is, but then you have these other people who are saying, God, you are so great. And essentially what Jesus is saying here, he's kind of calling them out and kind of saying, you're asking me for a sign, but I am the sign, and I am the greatest. You're not going to see anything better than me. I am the greatest of all time. There's no other discussion, there's no other miracles, no other signs are required. What you see is what you get, and what you get is the greatest thing that could ever be. So in sports, like basketball, soccer, baseball, all these sports, we can have arguments of who's the greatest of all time. So let's take basketball, for example. I'm not a huge basketball fan, but I know in basketball, if you have a conversation about the greatest of all time, two names that are going to come up, that's just naturally going to come up, is Michael Jordan and LeBron James. Those are two names that are going to be in this conversation because of their championships, because of their records, because of who they were. Well, it would be like this. So Jesus comes and says, you guys know Solomon and you know Jonah. Those are household names. You guys know their stories. You know who they are. Well, guess what? I'm even greater than them. It would be like me standing up here right now and saying to you, hey, listen, you know Michael Jordan, you know LeBron James. Well, I'm going to settle this conversation right now. I, Josh Raj, am the greatest basketball player of all time. I'm the greatest basketball player that's ever lived. I'm the greatest of all time. What's your initial reaction to that? What is the first thing your brain's going to go to? Prove it. Show me. What's your record? Go one-on-one with someone that I think is great and see what happens. Try to walk on an NBA team and see what happens. You want to see proof that I am really that great. What Jesus is saying is, I've already shown you the proof. So we can talk a little bit too about, the comparison. So Jonah was somebody that was in the belly of a fish for 3 days and spit out to do the Lord's work. Well, guess what happened? Later on in life, Jesus would be put in the grave, and 3 days later, he would rise up. Solomon was the wisest king of Israel, and so he was a king. We have Jesus, who is the eternal king in the kingdom of God, and as the Son of God, would be wiser than any other human that has ever lived. Essentially, in this conversation, it's an easy win. Jesus is the greatest. And even if it just boils down to this, every person who has ever lived has died and stayed dead. Jesus died and defeated death to raise from the dead. Every other king or queen or ruler, their rule has come to an end. You can look at any empire that's ever come before, and guess what? It's not here anymore. They've all come to an end. Every ruler comes to their end, but Jesus' kingdom is forever. Based on these two things alone, we can kind of say, yeah, Jesus, you kind of have a pretty good argument for being the greatest of all time. So this kind of brings us to this. The ultimate greatness of Jesus invites our response. That's like our big idea for our time together. The ultimate greatness of Jesus invites our response. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's talk about those teams, right? So when Michael Jordan was still a basketball player, there was so many basketball players that wanted to be on his team. Why? Because he was so great. He had a greatness about him, and if others felt like if they could be on his team, then they would win too, and maybe they could learn something from him. Greatness is inviting. Even more so, fans want to be at the game. Stadiums get sold out. Why? Because there's greatness, and there's something about being in proximity to greatness that makes us feel something. It makes us feel alive. It makes us feel kind of a sense of exhilaration and sometimes even almost intoxication. We become obsessed with something that we believe to be great. So where does that bring us then with Jesus? Let's say that Jesus is the greatest of all time. So the next question that we need to seek to find the answer to is, how can I live in light of Jesus' greatness? That's the next question we're going to seek to find an answer to. How can I live in light of Jesus' greatness? How should I respond to Jesus? I'm going to ask you to do something that's a little bit awkward, but I'm going to ask you to do it anyway. Unless you're driving or doing something that would hinder you from doing this safely. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for just a second while I read these next couple verses. So if you could close your eyes, I know it's a little weird, but if you could close your eyes, we're going to go for it. So this verse says in verse 33 of Luke chapter 11, it says, "No one after lighting a lamp puts it in a cellar or under a basket, but on a stand, so that those who enter may see the light. Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eye is healthy," you can open your eyes with healthy eyes, "your whole body is full of light. But when it is bad," so close your eyes again. I know it's a little weird, but we're going to work it out. "When your eye is bad, your body is full of darkness. Therefore, be careful lest the light in you be darkness. If then," you can open your eyes again. We're not going to close them again for the rest of our time together. "If then your whole body is full of light, having no part dark, it will be wholly bright as when a lamp with its rays gives you light." When you light a light, you put it somewhere so people can see it, because that's the point of having a light. Well, if Jesus is the greatest in general, and he's using this analogy of light, we could say that Jesus is also the greatest light. So let's talk about the ways that we might be able to respond to his greatness and his light. So the question that we're seeking to find an answer to is, how can we live in light of Jesus' greatness? And the first response we can have in reference to this question is that we can receive. We can receive. Verse 33 talks about, of Luke chapter 11, talks about seeing the light. What is brought through your eyes shapes who you are. It shapes your mind, your body, and your soul. If nothing good comes in, then there is nothing good. Those who choose to keep their eyes closed will essentially live in darkness by default, and those who open their eyes can live in the light. In this life, I know this is not a popular opinion, but I believe it to be true. Light does not come from within us. Light only comes from God. Light does not come from within us. Now, as a clarification point, God made us, and he made us to be like himself. So there are aspects of his character and aspects of his light that exists within us, but that's just a glimpse. If you want true light, it comes from a source far greater than us and far outside of ourselves, yet so close, and that is Jesus himself. And the light that he has to offer is greater than any other light. If you can find a light that's better, please reach out to me. I would be very curious to look into it. But as far as I've seen in this world, there's nothing better. Maybe you're still not sure of that yet. This is kind of that first aspect of receiving and seeing. Maybe you're still not sure. Maybe you're kind of like, I don't know. Like, there's Jesus, but there's all these other religions. There's Jesus, but there's all these other ideas. There's Jesus, but this. There's Jesus, but that. I want to invite you today to just start this process of looking into it. Look into the light. See if you can receive it. Look back at Luke chapter 11. Look through another book that Solomon wrote was Ecclesiastes. Look through that book and see what these wise people had to say. See if you can find light in God that's much brighter than anything else that you've seen before. Part of this is about the afterlife. Part of this in finding light through Jesus, part of it is finding light in heaven after we die, after this world ends. And part of it is missing out on light and ending up in darkness in hell. That is part of this. There is an eternal message at stake here. But there's also life on this earth. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and you were too lazy to turn the light on, or maybe there was someone else in the room so you didn't turn the light on, and you're just stumbling around, trying to find something, tripping over things, stepping on things? Stumbling around this world in darkness usually doesn't end too well. It usually ends in a stub toe and some swear words. If you turn the light on, if you find the light outside of yourself and walk towards it and find hope in it, I believe that your life on this earth can be so much better. Jesus said that he came that we could have life, not only life, but life to its fullest. He talks about this analogy of the window of our soul, the eye, if you bring things in, if your eye is healthy, then you bring in the light. And if your eye is closed, or if your eye is unhealthy, then no light can come in. So we've talked about this idea of how can I live in light of Jesus' greatness? The first way we can do that is by receiving it and seeing the light. After seeing the light, there's another way we can respond. And it's not just seeing it, but it's also to be filled by it. So a phrase that's used here is having no part dark. There's no darkness left. It's only light. You can open the windows and let all the light in. Well, there's another option. You can open the window just a crack and let a little bit of light in. You can have a little bit of Jesus and a little bit of something else. As far as I can tell, that doesn't really work. It's like these people asking for a sign. They want a little bit. They want just enough to feel good about themselves, but they don't want enough to actually have to change or actually have to do anything different or do something that might make them feel uncomfortable. There's a strange phrase in verse 35, and it says this: be careful lest the light in you be darkness. And I had no idea what this meant, so I had to research this a lot. I am not significantly smarter than anyone else, but I did take a ton of time to look into this. So a couple ways that this was explained to me: be careful lest the light in you be darkness, verse 35. One way, the commentary said this: don't twist and distort the light to try to make it what you want, in so making the light itself darkness. A comparison that I can make here is like counterfeit money. You can make a counterfeit bill. You can try to make it look like the real thing, and it might pass for the real thing from time to time, but in the end, we all know that it's not actually the real thing. It doesn't hold as much weight as the real thing, and it's not as valuable as the real thing. Another way is that we can look at other things thinking that they are and can be the light of our life, or kind of a mix and match. Like, I'll take a little bit of Jesus, but I'll take a little bit of this too, and I'll take a little bit of that too. And sometimes, even as Christians, sometimes we'll get stuck in this kind of thinking of like, yeah, I'll be happy. I'll feel light once I get that promotion. I'll be happy and I'll feel light once I finish school. I'll be happy and feel light when I'm married, or when I have kids, or when I buy the house, or when I blah, 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 blah. Even as Christians, we get sucked into this. It's fine to have goals. It's fine to achieve things. That's great. That's amazing. We should be the greatest achievers of all time, of anyone else, because we have the hope and light of Jesus to live with and live by. But our light should not be found in those things. Another example is this. You know, like if you're in college, right, or high school or something, you get invited to a party and you feel like you're so cool, especially if you're underage and you're gonna go drink or you're gonna go smoke something, and you're like, man, I really arrived. Like, I found the light of the world. This is awesome. Like, we're gonna have so much fun. It's gonna be so cool. So yeah, like Saturday night, we're drinking, we're getting blazed. And then it turns into like Saturday and Sunday night, we're drinking, it's having a good time. And then it's like Saturday, Sunday, and Monday night too. And then it's like every night, and then it's like every morning, and then it's like all day, and then it's like we lose track of the things that are actually important to us because we got sucked into this life that we didn't think we wanted to be in. And if you take a step back, you're like, man, I thought this was some light. Like, I thought this was a good thing. I thought this was going to be fun. I've never met any single person who set out to become an addict or an alcoholic. They were looking for light somewhere, and they thought they could find it at the bottom of the bottle. They thought they could find it in a baggie on the corner. They thought they could find light in a place where light does not exist. And how many stories have we heard of celebrities, their lives fall apart and unravel because they thought that having fame and money and all this stuff, they thought that would fulfill them. They thought that could be their light. Well, they get to the end of that road and they still are left wanting more. Well, why? Because it can't fulfill you. Because it's temporary. Because it's circumstantial. Because the God who exists outside of our time and space and circumstances, who is constant, and hope and faith and grace and love, is the only thing that can truly fulfill us in this life. It sounds kind of nice to be full of light, but to be full of light, we need to get out of the way. You ever hear, like, growing up, you standing in front of the TV, the classic dad phrase, Father's Day, so I can use cheesy phrases like this. So your dad probably is one in the room who says what? You're standing in front of the TV. You make a better what? You make a better door than a window. You're better at blocking things than you are at letting things through. And that's true in our life too. It can be so hard for us to move out of the way. But that is essentially our last point. So we have these ideas of how can I live in light of Jesus' greatness? Pause for another cheesy pun. I did this on purpose, that it is about light, and I'm talking about living in light of Jesus' greatness. I am a dad, so I'm allowed to use dad humor. How can I live in light of Jesus' greatness? Yeah, you might get it, you might not. Some dad jokes are just like a little too good, and you just can't really like grab onto them. I get it, we're cool. So the few ways that we could do this we're talking about so far is we can receive it, take it on as our own. The next thing we can do is be filled with it. Fill our whole selves with the only thing that can truly be light in our life. Allow it to shine on every area of our life, even the areas that we don't want light to be on. And the last way we're going to talk about for our time together is that we can share it. Back into verse 33, it says, you saw that light, it was on a stand. If you're a Christian right now, I'm a Christian right now, I saw the light. Okay, my mom was a Christian, and I had a lot of people in the church that we were going to, and I saw the light of Jesus shining through them, and you know what I said? I want that. I want what you have. I want what you have. I don't have that right now, and I want it. I'm craving it. I desire it. Well, guess what? If you're a Christian and you're listening to this, here's my message for you. Now it's your turn. Put the light on a stand. And it's easier said than done, but the way that we do this is by reflecting the light. We ourselves are not light, but we can be a pretty good mirror if we want to. We can be a pretty good window and let that light come through us. We can reflect the light of Jesus. But the question is, do you do that well? And none of us are perfect, so this isn't about like every single thing you do being perfect and nitpicking, but it's about kind of general character. Like, Who are you as a person? Describe your personality. Are you the first person to complain, gossip, and start drama and problems? Or are you the first person to be patient and kind and compassionate? There's a few quotes that I want to share that I think kind of help unpack this idea of what it means to share the light of Jesus in the world today. The first one says, be careful how you live. Your life will be the only Bible some people ever read. I want to read that one more time. Be careful how you live. Your life will be the only Bible that some people will ever read. If someone really examined your life, really examined it, would they see the grace, hope, love, and truth of Jesus? Or would they see, you kind of talk about that on Sunday morning, but the rest of the week you look like everybody else? Would they see someone and say, wow, like, the more I look at your life, the more I realize you have something different in you and you have something that I kind of want. Like, can you tell me more about this Jesus guy? He seems pretty great because I see the aspects of his greatness in you, and I want more of that. So here's another one that stuck out for me, and it says this: preach the gospel at all times. The gospel being the message of grace and truth that Jesus came, died, rose again for our life, to buy us back. Preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. Does the life that you live reflect the truth of the gospel? When you share the gospel, will anyone listen if they look at your life? Do they see something that matches? And again, I'm not talking about perfection. I'm not saying that you need to live perfect all the time. Jesus came to die because he knew you couldn't be perfect, just like I can't be perfect. But the general gist of your life. Are you the whiner? Are you the drama starter? Are you the person who everybody knows cheats on anybody you're with? Is that who you are? Because if that's who you are, that's not who Jesus was. You're not living in light of his greatness, which is going to hurt you as an individual, but it's also going to hurt your testimony. If you try to share Jesus with other people, they're like, dude, I just saw what you did the other day. Like, you're worse than I am. What do I want to listen to your advice for? Like, that doesn't make sense. So continuing on, starting to round the corner to wrap up our time. One of the things that we value at Wellspring Church is pursuing community. And a question that we like to ask ourselves is, do I have a community that is encouraging to my faith? Am I in relationships that can encourage my faith? And I want to push us towards that kind of value this week. A couple weeks ago, Pastor Jason encouraged people to go out and find somebody and ask them about their prayer life. Ask them about what God is doing in their life and to see how they can apply it to them. Well, this week I want to do something similar but also different. And the challenge I want to give you for this week is ask a Christian friend, how can I better live in light of Jesus' greatness? When you ask that question, be prepared for the answer, because it's not going to be pretty. They're going to point out your darkness. You might not like that. But this is the part where we try to be holy like Jesus is holy. And the way we do that is acknowledge the areas where we're falling short. Ask a Christian friend, how can I better live in light of Jesus' greatness? When they give that answer, bite your tongue. Let them talk. Ask clarifying questions. What do you mean by that? How have you seen that to be true in my life? Also ask questions like, hey, based on what you know about Jesus, what would it look like for me to live more like Jesus in this area? What are some steps that I could take? And check this out. Bonus challenge. Because it's Father's Day and it's a holiday, so we get bonuses. And what I want you to do also is to share the light of Jesus with somebody today. Whether this is in a text, a phone call, social media, whatever it might be. Like I said before, Father's Day can be great, but Father's Day can also be really, really hard. And so what I want you to do is share the light of Jesus. So if you've been following along, you've understood that Jesus is the greatest, or heard that and started to grapple with that he's the greatest light and we can receive his light. We can be filled with his light and allow it to shine on every area of our life, living a life to its fullest with him. And another thing that we can do is overflow that light and share it with those around us. I love you all. Thank you so much for sticking around with us. We hope to see you in person very soon. And till next time.
Thank you so much for joining today's online worship experience. We're so thankful and excited that you're here, and we hope today's message was a blessing to you. Now, I just want to say thank you to every single person that gives financially to this church. Because you give, we're able to continue to do what we know God has called us to do. That our mission is that we exist to ignite a craving for Jesus by relentlessly loving our community. So thank you so much. Now, if it's your first time today, we don't want anything from you. We just want you to enjoy today's online experience. But if you call Wellspring Church home, there are ways to give on the screen. We would love for you to partner with us financially. Okay, that's it for today's online worship experience. We're thankful that you're here, and we can't wait to see you online again next week on YouTube, Sunday at 10 a.m. And don't forget, you can always join us in person for our outdoor worship experience. Again, Sunday, 10 a.m. in our parking lot, live worship, live teaching, live community. It's great. We can't wait to see you. Hope you have a great week. Peace.